make a start. So, firstly, welcome everyone. Thanks for joining us today. Today's topic is going to be what's new in SharePoint for content creators. We'll touch on a few other elements as we're going through today. It's going to be largely demos. I'm going to show some of the new features around some of the new web parts. We're going to show things around the brand center and fonts, what we can do with that, and also just have a look at some of one of the new things, the flexible section, which is just rolling out at the moment as well. So this is great for content creators, but also good for anybody that likes doing the design side of SharePoint. So we might just start with a few little sort of housekeeping things. Firstly, we are giving away a ticket to the Digital Workplace Conference, and the giveaway is going to be drawn tomorrow. So Mel's going to pop the link into the chat for anybody that feels like they would like to enter. So the prize is a ticket to the Digital Workplace Conference, but unfortunately we can't cover the flights and accommodation. So if you want to book the Hilton, you'll need to convince the boss to do that, and flights as well. We also, last week, we launched our brand new newsletter, which is a LinkedIn newsletter. So the idea of the newsletter is a way of keeping people informed on what's coming up, but also in terms of things like events that we are involved in at Stratos, but also to share some tips and views on where we think technology is going and the kind of things which are topical in the SharePoint and Power Platform space in particular. And on that, in that first newsletter, we had a really good response. So thank you for everybody that's subscribed. If you haven't, we'd love it if you did. You can find out what Mel likes to do with her pizzas, and also some other interesting kind of technology things, and also some details of the next webinar. So the next webinar that we'll be running, so these on a monthly cadence, will be Simon Langford, who's our operations manager, and he's going to do a talk which will be around security, not trying to get too deeply technical, but around security, and be useful for anybody that's got a bit of an interest in the security side of Microsoft 365 or security practices in general. Simon's really knowledgeable in this area, so he's got a few thoughts to share on that one. So today's webinar format, because we're using the webinar, we can't hear you talk, but what you can do is you can pop messages into the chat, and Mel's going to monitor the chat while I talk. So if you've got a thing you'd like to drill into, or you've got a comment on it, please pop it in the chat and we'll try and pick those up. I'll try and get through the demo in about half an hour, so we've got time for questions and things at the end. So I might pick up some of them towards the end or at breakpoints through the presentation. So I'm just going to share my screen, and I'm going to start with, maybe we'll start with the brand center, because this is kind of a new thing for some people. So last year, Microsoft started a journey of, I guess, improving the UI look of SharePoint, and they've done quite a lot of work over the last 12 months, and there's a lot of that work is starting to roll out now. And so we saw at the end of last year the brand center roll out, which is the thing I'm about to show you. But also in January and start of February, we saw some new web parts starting to come out, and most recently a feature called flexible sections. So these are all things which are useful for content creators and answer some of the common questions that we've had from clients. So the brand center is a place where you can, as a SharePoint site, where you can, which you can configure yourself, because it's just content pages, to represent your brand. And so it might replace the traditional PDF branding guidelines, perhaps to help people understand what it is that they can and can't do with your company brand. You can link it to things like your actual design templates, your approved images, and so on. But probably the most exciting feature is the ability to create sort of brand packages made up of a combination of theme colors and fonts. And fonts is the one which we get lots of questions about. So let's just jump into behind the scenes. Actually, what I might just start from the admin center. So in the admin center, if we go into our settings, so you'll need to be a Microsoft 365 admin to do this. Underneath the organization settings, you'll see an option in here called Brand Center. And when we go into the Brand Center, we have the ability to set up a site and then connect that brand. That site will then become our brand center, and also a brand center app. So we deploy this, so it creates this little app in the site which lets us do the configuration we need to do around things like fonts. Then once that site's provisioned, we go over into our brand center site, and on the cog menu at the top right, we have an option here to go to brand center. So this is a new option that appears once you've enabled the brand center functionality. And of course, you need to have permission to the site to be able to do this. We go into the brand center, then we've got the ability in here to create font packages and brand color packages. So if I go into here and click into the fonts, for example, I can create a set of fonts here, and I can upload my company fonts to the site and make those available in SharePoint. So what I've done here, you'll see I've uploaded a couple of fonts. I won't go into the process of doing that, but essentially you download the TrueType font package, and then you can upload it into this area, which makes them available for SharePoint. If you are interested in fonts, there's a site called fontpeer.co. This site has got lots of free fonts on it, all kinds of fonts if you're wanting to try and find a few interesting ones, but more often than not, you'll be talking about your corporate brand fonts, and your marketing team will probably have those already. Once we've created a font package, you'll see that we can't actually preview the font on here, but the font package, we can then assign those fonts to different styles within SharePoint. When we do that, we've got this, we can then go down here and apply the brand. So what we're doing here is we're creating our font package and themes. And if I go into this one here, you'll see I've created a font package with some of my favorite fonts in here, and you can set the size, whether they're bold or not, and so on for the different styles within SharePoint. So our title, our heading, our body, any interactive text, etc. And you'll notice down here about an accessibility reminder. Which reminds me, there is a new accessibility checker in SharePoint, which I'll show you also. So what does that look like when we go into SharePoint itself? So if I click over into a SharePoint site, here's one that we prepared earlier, and then go into change the look. So once we've published the font and themes, we can go into change the look on the site. And up here, you've got this new option called fonts. And from here, you can choose the published fonts. Those fonts can be published either to a site or at the organization level. So if I choose the font set, watch carefully, we should see the fonts change on the site. And you'll see those ones there are not particularly good in the SharePoint space, but the point really is that they're there. I wanted to choose something you could see the change was quite radical around the font. And then if you want to change back, you can just change back to the Microsoft default fonts or one of the font packages that they provide for you, just like that on the site. So nice and quick and easy. And the last thing that you need to do once you actually change that is there's a save option down the bottom here. So when I do this here, I just choose that set. It's just previewing for me. When I hit save, then it becomes available for all users to see the fonts in that sort of style. So I won't save that one. I'll just cancel out of there, and you'll see it reverts back. So that's a very quick tour of the Brand Center. But probably the key things: bring your company fonts to SharePoint, and often that's a request that we get quite high up on the list of things that people will be asking for. I'm just going to change SharePoint sites, and the reason I'm going to do that is because the feature I want to show is rolled out to one of my tenants, but not to my developer tenants. So I'm just going to cancel out of there for a second and share to a different screen. And now, in fact, before we jump onto the next one, has anybody got any questions on the Brand Center?
There's a question.
There is a question?
Yep.
What's the question, Mel?
Have you come across any ways to enable the new Brand Center features without the requirement for a public CDN?
No. So there isn't a requirement for a public CDN for this. The public CDN only holds the font packages and the design elements. It doesn't store any document content, but some organizations won't allow that. So as a prerequisite requirement. So there's no alternative currently for that. Okay, so I'm now on a different SharePoint site, and this one I'm going to show you a bunch of new features which are rolling out at the moment, much more for content editors. So I'm going to start with my homepage here, and I'm just going to edit the homepage. And on the home page, I'm going to do a few things with some of the new features. So the very first new feature that we've got is this one in the sections called a flexible section. Now, flexible sections are quite neat because a flexible section lets you gives you like a movable canvas where you can move elements around on the page. You can drag and change the height of it. And because it's a section, you can do things like set the background color or image. So I might just choose one that's going to stand out a wee bit, make the background color there. Once I've done that, I can then, like the natural thing you would do in SharePoint is go up into the, sorry, my mouse has stopped working. Let's try that. We go up into here and try to add a new web part, but you can't with a flexible section. What you do instead is you drag web parts in. So if I wanted to take these quick links, for example, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to duplicate them, and then I'm going to drag the quick link over into this part here. And you'll see that this flexible section, I'm just going to drag it down a wee bit more, so I've got a bit more working space. But what I might want to do is make that element look like this, and I might want to position it. My mouse is sticking a wee bit for some reason. I might want to move that around the page a little bit just to a position where I want it. And I might want to be very precise. You can see I've got a little grid turning up in the background there. Then I've got this other one here, which is obviously very important. I'm going to take that and I'm going to move this one and I'm going to pop it over to the side over here like this. If anybody's used like a Windows manager on an old Unix system, that's what this reminds me of a little bit. You can position things around on a grid on the screen. But you can do more than this. You could go and actually, if we add another web part in here, like a, let's go and add a news web part. Sorry, actually, news web part. And we'll add that. And I'm just going to take this news web part. I'm going to change the style to, oh, actually, maybe I'll change it to the tiles option. And I'm going to move that up into my section up here. But now I've got this on the page. I might go, actually, I want to make this smaller. So I can resize that one and I can move this one down. So now I've got my news kind of resized in line in the page. And you'll see it's changed to a carousel mode. I'll do that. Or I can actually change that from here to carousel as well. Once I've done that, I've got layers. So now I can go into my layers here and I can add other web parts on top. So if I wanted to go and add a text web part, for example, I can put some text in here, say hot off the press. I could make that bold and I could change the color of this to red. And then I could move this web part up here like this. And you can see it sits over top of the news web part. I can just resize that. And I can make this, I could obviously restyle this, but the idea is you can then layer your web parts, which is something you can't do currently. And one of the things that we often hear currently is that, oh, it'd be nice if we could like put little tags and things in there as well. So you've got this ability, much more control over a page. But this creates a problem in the same way that my font did earlier, which is around accessibility. So can a person read this? So on the right-hand side of SharePoint on the section here, there's a little pop-out person. If you click on that person, that's an accessibility checker. And it's going, looking good, no problems found, which I find a little bit hard to believe. But what it's looking for is it's looking for things where there's too much contrast or things which are going to make it difficult for someone to read the screen. And what I have seen is when I've got a poorly laid out page, it will actually give me some suggestions on what to change. And I'll show this on a different page shortly so you can see what happens. But that's the flexible layout. So that's the first new thing, and it's just rolling out now. So you may or may not have this one in your tenant yet. The next thing that we have, which is I really like, is the hero web part now has a carousel. So the hero web part, hero web parts used to look by default like this. So they have a bunch of tiles, and you could have images on tiles. But now they've got this carousel option, which is quite nice. There's a few do's and don'ts with carousels, which we'll talk about in a minute. But let's just go and add a link in here. I'm just going to choose a stock image from somewhere. I'll just choose this one here and insert that one. When we insert the stock image, we've got a few things that we can do with it. Okay, so now we've got the image here. We can edit this one, and down in here we can specify like how the opacity of the page, whether it's an overlay color or not, so we can set white or dark background. Alignment, we can give it a topic. So this topic might be company values. And then the headline might be demonstrating excellence award. And then the description text down here could be here, whoops, here how Joe demonstrated excellence. And you'll see that that pops down the bottom on the page. This new layout here, and then the last thing you can do is you can actually pop a link in. So when the person clicks the link, it takes them to the full article. So that's kind of it's a new feature. If you add multiple, you can have it'll scroll like a carousel. So let's just go and add one more just so we can see. I'm going to go add a slide, a link, just choose another stock image. Let's just choose this one here. And now we've got a couple of images on there. If we just go and put in some text in here, so it's going to be our topic, our headline, and description, text, and it's going to republish the page. Once I publish that page, now we've got this carousel down here. You'll see it should auto roll over after a few seconds, but it'll also, if you can click backwards and forwards. So a couple of little tips for using carousels. Anybody that reads the Norman Nielsen UX design reports will know that carousels get low engagement for items that are not the first item. So a good rule of thumb is for a carousel to have sort of a maximum of maybe 3, 4, 5 at a stretch items on the carousel. 3 is probably optimal because once you get past that, people don't actually sit and wait for the carousel. They want to move on to the next thing. And so there are different news layouts that you might decide are better to use in that scenario. But I do like the layout option that this gives you. It does give you something that's new, and it gives you a sort of a fresher look than you would have had if you tried to do this using, say, the news carousel, because it doesn't give you these. The news carousel just gives you a title and not the labels and demo text on here. A description text, sorry. While I'm thinking about web parts, there's one other new one which is really cool. This is called the editorial web part. So the editorial web part, if we add that one on, this is also rolling out at the moment. This one gives you the ability to completely customize an image with customizable text, links, and so on. So it's kind of like the call out or the call to action web part, but with lots of improvements. And you can use this one. To sort of highlight things on your intranet that you might want to bring to the fore. People often do things with images, for example, where they'll create an image for this, and the image is clickable through to a link. This is a little bit nicer, and it gives you the ability to put a wee bit of a blurb and a story in here. And if you pop it into a section, which is, let me just see if I can create another section down here. I'll do one above actually. I'm going to go add a new section. If I go and do something like a 3x3 section, I can take that web part up into the section. You'll see it fits in the category like that, so it resizes based on the section type. And you can go into here. You can change the overlay image. You can have a color block. You can split it. There's lots of configuration on here. There's an advanced editor, which gives you the ability to take you through and edit the image and crop it and so on as well. And all of the sort of standard controls that you might have, like background color, again, set the opacity of the image, and link through buttons and so on here as well. So this is another really hot off the press, brand new web part. I was on a call this morning, and this was one of the main topics of discussion, which was really cool. So there's a few. So those are the new web parts which are available. I'm just going to republish my page, and then I wanted to show you the accessibility checker on a page which is going to fail some of the things. So if I go to a page here which has got lots of, it's quite busy, it's got lots of stuff on it. You'll see it's got a bunch of things, images, maps, links, and so on. If we go into edit this page and then choose the accessibility checker, you'll see it's got a few things in here. So it's missing alt text on the banner image. So alt text is useful for screen readers, for example. The text in the text web parts are hard to read because of the contrast, and there's some further missing alt text further down. So it'll give you cues to help you just make sure the page is going to work for if you've got people that have accessibility requirements. So I recommend writing to that standard anyway, because you don't know who's going to be in the organization in the future, and it's always nice to cater for people's needs, especially when they've got low vision or issues with things like contrast if they're working in a bright environment, for example, as well. So that's really quickly the new web parts. Has anybody got any questions on the new web parts before I jump into the next thing?
Flexible sections responsive for staff on mobile devices?
This is a very good question. So the answer is it depends on how it depends a little bit on what you design. So a little bit of the onus is on the author, but yes, they are flexible, but they're controlling the order in which things appear on the page. That's something that if that's important and you're using flexible sections, you should test on the page that you're designing. So the whole idea is that the page is flexible, but that puts some of the onus of that of that responsiveness back on the person creating the page. And I would suggest that if you're going to do that, you just use the browser tools as a starting point. So if we go into our browser tools, I'm just going to go into developer mode for a second here. But in here, you'll see if I see my flexible section here is scrolled down that way. So the order of web parts, that control of that will be important when you're creating the page. So it is responsive, but the point is that you need to also test, because it's not, unlike the other web parts on the other section types, it's not because it's flexible, it has more opportunity for you to create something that doesn't quite make sense for a mobile user. So definitely want to test that when you're doing them. Let's talk a wee bit about page authoring and news content. So if I'm in SharePoint and I'm creating a news post, one of the we've always had this option up here. You can either go to your news site or wherever it is, and you go into here and you would create a news post. Just when we've got this menu open, you'll see it's got a new option here for agents. That's because I've got a Copilot license assigned to my account, so the Copilot agent option appears. And you'll see there's a thing in there called Space. Spaces have been around in SharePoint for a while, but are being deprecated and won't be supported. So if you are using Spaces, let us know and we can point you in the direction of the documentation on that. But it is being deprecated. Probably the first major feature of SharePoint. Well, I'm going to say big feature in SharePoint. I don't know if it's very widely used. That's been deprecated for a long time. So I've just gone into the news templates. And so in here, we can create templates that we save in our site. So we can create company-specific templates with your own brand. That's really easy to do. You just create the page and then save it as a template. Also got a bunch of starter ones, but one of the ones I want to show you here is this newsletter one. So I'm going to create a post using a newsletter template. And when I do that, it gives me a default layout with different sections to fill in. And I can go through and I can fill this out. Let's just give it a title. I'm just going to say webinar. And then down here, I might go, actually, I'm going to highlight this text here. If you've got Copilot, you've now got Copilot auto rewrite functionality built into the web parts, into the text web parts. So you can use that to rewrite your text or create a prompt for it. You can change the style. So let's make this more enthusiastic. We hope this newsletter finds you in good health. I got an email from someone that yesterday, the day before, which started with, I hope this email finds you well, and it was legitimate. And I thought, how did that get through our spam filter? So I'm going to replace that text, and you'll see. So it's changed the text. So it's got Copilot features to help you author. What's also coming is the ability for you to, like, this co-authoring, so you can edit together on draft items before publishing. I think that might be an exercise fraught in danger, so I would be careful doing that to start with, especially as that feature starts rolling out. But what you might also not notice, it's probably a little bit subtle, is that Microsoft have slowly improved the text web part with much more functionality in here now. So you can do, this is improving sort of in the background with little new and improved features coming in. So it's got like highlighters, for example. So if you're drafting, you can highlight text and so on from that. But let's assume now that we've published our newsletter, what we want to do is go, you'll see this option up here called post and send. This has been around in SharePoint for a while, but what it means when I do that is that it's going to create an email that will go out. So it'll publish the page in SharePoint, so it will appear as a news post, but it's also going to send an email with my newsletter in line. And it doesn't support all web parts, but you can use, there are quite a few web parts that will work in this format. And what this does is it renders an Outlook. So if the user's viewing the email in Outlook, it still records the click. So comms teams like to know how much engagement a post is getting. This will still record the click, so you'll see the total number of reads on that item is reflected against the news post. When you look at the read count on that item in the stats, it'll show it there. So you can send this out to a group, and you can customize the text with a message and so on as well, and send that to people. So I wanted to send this out to Mel, for example. I can put Mel in here, and then, or I could put a group in if it's a group. Obviously inside your organization, because the user receiving it needs to have SharePoint to be able to see it. You can also, down the bottom here, if you want to go send as a link, if you want to do the traditional way, if you still want to go back to how things used to be with old news posts as well. But send, that's cool. So that's sent that off. That news post is now published at the same time. So if I go back into my news thing here, there we go. It's popped up into my news web part on the front page of my site. So that's the publishing process through for news. One thing I would say about the news email things is don't try and get too over the top with your design. Less is more. If anybody's seen lingscars.com, you'll know what more looks like. Maybe we should pop that one up one day. But Lings Cars is like an award-winning website. It's absolutely amazing, but it's complete sensory overload when you try and view it. So that's all of the main features that are in SharePoint and sort of the publishing areas. A few things that are coming. We've got Copilot agents. Agents allow you to build a Copilot around a set of content. So Microsoft have announced licensing changes for that. So previously users needed to have a Copilot license. Now you can get an organization a per run license for that. So you could build an agent and have the agent available to everyone, and they can ask a maximum number of questions per month. I think the number is 10,000 per pack, but I might be wrong. That I need to doubly check. And the other big change, which has just been announced, is Microsoft Archive. So for people that have got large numbers of SharePoint sites and are buying extra storage, you might want to, your boss might be going, how can you reduce the cost of the long-term storage? Microsoft Archive gives us the ability to mark a site as archived and move it off to lower cost storage. That's great, except that it used to cost 60 cents US per gigabyte to bring the data back, and the minimum unit was the site. So if your site contained a terabyte of content and you needed to restore it to get one document, it was a pretty pricey exercise. But the announcement is that from the 31st of March, Microsoft are not going to charge for restoring from the archive, which is, I think that's fabulous, because one of the great things about archiving in SharePoint is that the information remains available in the search index, firstly, and secondly, it adheres to the security and retention policies that you apply. So you're not moving the information out into outside of SharePoint into some other system where you need to think about who can see what. It's just done with whatever permissions you had configured in the site. And if you've got retention policies that dispose at the end of the retention period, it will still work. It will still dispose of the messages at the end, other content at that point in time, or run a disposition review if you've got E5 and you're using file plans and so on. And I think that's all of the major features that are coming, that are rolling out at the moment. There are lots of things in the roadmap from Microsoft. One of the big things to keep an eye on this year will be the M365 conference, which is in May, where there'll be lots of announcements coming out around SharePoint in that space. There's some very exciting stuff in development, which is currently not public, so I can't talk about, but that conference in May will be where huge amounts of like really good stuff will be coming out. Lots of interesting new tools and capabilities within SharePoint. So we've got any questions on that? We might switch to a Q&A now, or if anybody's got anything that they'd like me to show them, I can try and do that in my demo environment.
Have you brand center assets? i.e., is it easier for it to produce brand compliant content?
That's a really good question. So I haven't tried, but my experience with creating anything that is kind of brand oriented is currently it's quite hard. If you think about though the design things, I'm just going to go back to actually if I go to this page here, back to here because I know where I was. When I go into here to edit the page, there are now some sort of section templates that come through. So you can have some different templates on potential layouts for pages and so on. I forgot to show this. But what you can't do yet is brand these with your corporate brand, which would be really cool if you could, because it'd be nice to make them line up. But if I wanted to like take this kind of section, you'll see it creates a section with that layout, and then I can go in and I can use it as my starting point and go and manually change. In Copilot in PowerPoint, I'm always disappointed with its inability to pick up company templates and so on. But I'm sure that that's something that's being worked on because it gets a lot of feedback. So I haven't seen it yet. Any other questions?
For the brand center, is that only storing the fonts and not the assets and images, or can you put?
Yeah, it's a SharePoint site, so you could put your organization asset libraries in there. So if you wanted to have I guess the concept is that you would have a marketing team looking after your templates and your brand and not IT. So because it's a SharePoint site, you can add additional libraries in there. You could make those organization asset libraries, but they all need to live in the one site. You can't have them scattered currently across a variety of sites, but you can have document templates, your stock images, and your fonts and your colors all in that one center. But yeah, you just have to manually set that up. By the way, the stock images, if I go into any image picker in SharePoint, so for example, if I go into here and I go to browse images, your organization images will show up on the side down here, your organization asset libraries. That's in any image picker anywhere in SharePoint on all web parts. So if you've got an organization asset library set up, that's where you'll see them. Oh, so they don't go to the public CDN. The public CDN only holds the fonts and and if you've got like a theme color palettes, it doesn't hold any document content or anything from that site. It's just those font elements, and the reason is for performance. Yeah. It would be, I'm sure that at some point this is going to come up that they bring it into in-house, but typically Microsoft starts with public first, and then they have these special tenants called GCC High, which are like government level tenants in the US. Those tenants can't connect to external things, so they tend to roll that out. So it usually comes a bit later in the piece, sometimes sort of 6 to 12 months behind. Can it generate a section template? No, it can't. But what it can do is it can generate like things like frequently asked question text from a document. So if I took here, for example, I'm just going to go into a document library. This is I just want to show you this feature. So while you can't create a section template, you'd lay the template out once and then save it, but you might want text to go in there. So if I've got a document here, which is called, it's about working at height. Oh, actually, but here's one on chemical usage. Let's just go to this document. If I select the document, I can, from the context menu, if I am lucky, I can create it. Sorry, I'm in the wrong place. If I favorite this, so if I go into here, right click the document and go add to favorites, there's a little step here you've got to do. And if I go to OneDrive and go to my favorites down here in OneDrive, you'll see that that document's there, and you'll see it's got the link. So then what I can do from here is I can use Copilot to create an FAQ from the document. And then I can take that FAQ content and I can paste that into my page. So the template itself you'd manually create, but if you're creating lots of FAQs for your quality system, for example, then you can do this as a way to generate a bunch of content to help people answer quick questions from that policy. And maybe that page also has a link to the policy document itself. As opposed to the other way you can do it, which is to create a Copilot. So I've got one here where I've got on my home page, I've created a page which has got two different agents installed on it. So here, so I've got one called environmental. So if I go into environmental agent, and I can ask it a question or tell it to do something. So I can say, write a paragraph about working near waterways. And so hopefully that's going to go away and look at my collection of documents that I have about work and find something that's about working near waterways, and it's going to return something useful in the term of in a bunch of in a text with references inside the documents as well. So that's what that's done there. And you can again copy and paste that in. So you can create an agent, and you can connect the agent to your SharePoint, to your intranet page or your team site page. Any other good questions there? That's it. All right. Well, look, thanks very much for attending webinar today. I might just stop sharing my screen so you can see me. Yeah, thanks very much for attending the webinar today. If there's any follow-on questions after this, if you just reach out to Mel, she's got things like the recording. So if you want the recording for others, or they're going to send that round, we're going to send a follow-up email after this. That's probably the better way to do it, with a link to the recording and so on. So if you need the recording, and if there's any questions about any questions that we haven't answered today, or you follow up afterwards, I'm happy to just ping them through also. I'm happy to try and answer those for you.